She was mopping the 7th floor of his building at 11:15 at night when he walked out of the stairwell. Shirt torn. Hand bleeding. The richest man in Accra, and she was the only person in the building. He looked at her and said 5 words she was not expecting. "Do you have a first aid kit?" She cleaned his wound. She said goodnight. She went back to work. And then he asked her to sit beside him at his grandmother's birthday dinner as his girlfriend. For 50,000 sadies. She laughed. She said no conditions, no deal. He agreed to every single one. But here's what nobody tells you about arrangements made at midnight in empty buildings. Some things cannot be kept inside a contract. And the woman who mopped his floors for 3 years and 4 months was about to become the one person his grandmother trusted. The one person his enemies could not break. And the one person he could not walk away from. This is her story. And it starts the night she treated his hand and he forgot to walk away. Welcome to Visa's Tales. If you are new here, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, so you never miss a story. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into it. There is a particular kind of woman that Accra produces. Not soft. Not hard either. Something in between, the way good leather is in between. It bends. It does not break. And if you press it in the wrong place for too long, it remembers. Grace Mensah was that kind of woman. She was 31 years old. She had a scar above her left eyebrow from a door handle she had walked into at age 7, and never fully explained to anyone. She had 2 pairs of shoes. One for work, one for church, and she rotated them with the discipline of a woman who understood that things last longer when you treat them with respect. She cleaned the Danso Boteng Tower on Liberation Road. Floors 1 through 8, Sunday through Friday, 10 at night to 4 in the morning. She had done it for 3 years and 4 months. She knew which corridor lights flickered on the 3rd floor. She knew which bathroom on the 6th had a tap that never fully closed. She knew which window on the 2nd floor let in a draft in the rainy season that nobody had fixed because nobody on the day shift had ever noticed it. She knew the particular silence of a building that has emptied itself of ambition for the night, and is just a building again. The way it breathed differently after 10 at night. The way the air conditioning changed note when the offices went dark. The way the lift made a different sound going down empty than it did going down with people inside it. She was good at her job the way people are good at things they have decided to take seriously regardless of whether anyone is watching. Nobody was ever watching. Until the night somebody was. It was a Thursday. 11:15. She was on the 7th floor. The Danso Boteng Tower had 30 floors. The top 12 belonged to Danso Boteng Holdings, the company, the boardrooms, the glass-walled offices with views that made people feel like gods on clear days and like clouds on harmattan ones. The bottom 18 were rented out to smaller companies that could not afford the top but liked the address on their letterhead. Grace cleaned the bottom 18. She had never been to the top 12. She had no reason to go. Her world was floors 1 through 8, and she knew every centimeter of it, every scuff on every skirting board, every ceiling tile that had gone slightly yellow from a leak that was fixed 2 years ago but had left its mark anyway. She was finishing the corridor outside a law firm's reception on 7. Long corridor. Pale tiles that showed everything, the kind of floor that made her arms ache on bad nights, when she heard the lift. It was the executive lift. The one that required a key card. The one she had never once been inside. It should not have been moving at 11:15. She stood still with her mop, and listened to it descend past her floor. Past 6. Past 5. It kept going down. Then footsteps in the stairwell beside her. 2 sets. Moving fast. She did not panic. She was not a woman who panicked easily. She had been alone in this building at midnight too many times for footsteps to frighten her. But she put her hand on the mop handle the way you put your hand on something solid when you're not sure what is coming, and she waited. The stairwell door opened. The first man through was in a security uniform, gray, Danso Boteng logo on the chest. The kind of man had been in this building long enough that his face matched the walls. He saw her and stopped, so suddenly his shoes squeaked on the tile. The second man came through the door behind him, and stopped too. He was tall. That was the first thing. Not the tallest man she had ever seen, but tall in the way that fills a doorway. And he stood in the doorway for a half-second before he came all the way through. The second thing she noticed was his shirt. It was the kind of shirt that cost more than her monthly salary, pale blue, good fabric, and the collar was torn. Not dramatically. A small tear, the kind that happens when someone grabs you, and you pull away. The third thing was his right hand. He was holding it slightly away from his body. There was blood on the knuckles. Not much. A cut. But blood. There is someone here, the security man said. To the tall man, not to Grace. Like she was a detail to be managed. The tall man looked at her. Grace looked back. "Good evening," she said. He blinked. He had the look of a man who had expected many things on the 7th floor at 11:15, and a woman with a mop greeting him calmly was not one of them. "Good evening," he said. His voice was steadier than she had expected, given the shirt and the hand. "Sir, we should keep moving," the security man said, low and urgent. "Give me a moment, Kofi." He did not look away from Grace. Then he said, and she was not ready for how simply he said it, "Do you have a first aid kit?" His name was Adrian Danso Boateng. She did not know that yet when she opened the supply closet and found the small green box on the second shelf where she always kept it. She had known the name the way you know a mountain you have lived near for years without climbing it. She had heard it, seen it on the building, read it on the memos that sometimes missed the shredder and ended up in her bin bags. But it had never attached itself to a person standing in front of her bleeding. He sat on the narrow bench outside the law firm's glass door. Kofi stood at the end of the corridor with his back to them, watching the stairwell door, which told Grace that whatever had happened upstairs was the kind of thing that might follow a person down. She opened the kit. She took out the antiseptic, the cotton wool, the strip plasters. "Give me your hand," she said. He held it out. She cleaned the cut. He did not make a sound, which she noted. Some men made sounds to let you know they were being brave. He simply sat and let her work, and watched her work, which was different. The cut was across the knuckles of his right hand. Clean. Consistent with hitting something hard and flat. "What happened?" she said. Not because it was her business. Because the cut needed context to be treated correctly. "The railing on 30, he said. "I hit it." She looked at the cut. Consistent with that. She pressed a strip plaster across it carefully and smoothed the edges down. "You should have a doctor look at this properly," she said. "I will." He flexed his fingers slowly, one at a time, testing. "Thank you." She closed the kit. She straightened up. He was still looking at her. Not the way men sometimes looked at her in buildings at night, which was the look that made her grip the mop handle differently. He was looking at her the way people look at something that has surprised them, and they're still deciding what to do with the surprise. "You are the cleaner," he said. "For this floor." "Floors 1 through 8, sir." He looked down the corridor. At her trolley. At the mop. At the supplies arranged in their order. "How long have you worked here?" he said. 3 years and 4 months, sir." He nodded once. Something moved in his face, a calculation of some kind. "I have never seen you," he said. "No, sir." She put the first aid kit under her arm. "You are usually gone by 7. He looked at her. "You know my hours." "I know when the executive lift stops moving," she said. "That is not the same thing." He was quiet for a moment. "Then no. That is not the same thing at all." He stood up. He was even taller standing. He straightened the torn collar with one hand, a habit, the gesture of a man who was usually put together, and knew when he was not. "What is your name?" he said. "Grace, sir." "Grace." He said it back simply. Not repeated back like an echo, not turned into a diminutive. Just the name as it was. "I need to ask you something, Grace, and I need you to understand before I ask it that you are completely free to say no and there will be no consequence of any kind." She waited. "How much do they pay you?" he said. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Nobody asks that question without a reason, and in her experience the reason was never one she liked. "I'm asking," he said, "because what I am about to say will make no sense unless you understand that I know what the number means. I am not asking to use it against you. I am asking because context matters and I want to be honest with you." She looked at him for a moment. The security man at the end of the corridor had not moved. The building was very quiet around them. 800 sadies a month, she said. He absorbed this without expression. Without the sharp intake of breath that some people did when she said it. The kind that was worse than saying nothing because it had pity inside it. "I will pay you 50,000 sadies, he said, "to attend my grandmother's birthday dinner on Saturday evening and sit beside me as my girlfriend." The corridor was very, very quiet. Grace looked at him. She looked at the first aid kit in her hands. She looked at the trolley down the hall with the mop leaning against it. "Sir," she said, "it is 11:30 at night. I know. And you are bleeding. I am aware. And you want me to believe that this is a serious conversation, and not something a man says when he has had a bad evening and is not thinking clearly. I want you," he said, "to let me explain. 5 minutes. And then you decide. And if the answer is no, I will walk out of this building, and you will never hear this from me again." She looked at him. She looked at the 6 rooms still on her list for tonight. "You have 5 minutes, she said. "I have work to finish." He explained quickly and without decoration, which she respected because men in his position were not always capable of it. His grandmother was Grandma Rose Danso Boateng, 80 years old this Saturday. The woman who had built the original Danso Boateng trading company from a market stall at Makola that sold printed cloth, that had sold enough cloth over enough years to become a warehouse, and the warehouse had become two, and the two had become a logistics company, and the logistics company had become the foundation under the tower they were currently standing in. Grandma Rose had done all of this with her own hands, and her own mind, and a stubbornness that her family described as a gift, and her competitors had called something else entirely. She was 80 years old, and she was sharp, and she was dying. Not immediately. Not in a dramatic way. In the slow way that happens when lungs have been gradually failing for 2 years and the doctors speak carefully and use words like managing and comfortable, and when the time comes. Her mind was perfectly clear. Her opinions were perfectly clear. And one opinion above all others had been expressed so many times over the last 3 years that it had become a kind of weather in the Danso Boateng household, a permanent condition, expected, unavoidable, present in every family gathering like humidity in June. She wanted Adrian settled before she went. He was 37. He had been engaged once, for years ago, to a woman whose family had been very pleased by the match, and considerably less pleased by Adrian himself once they spent enough time with him, which had eventually become relevant in ways that ended the engagement at a dinner in front of 12 people. Since then, nothing. Not for lack of women who would have taken the call. For lack of something in Adrian that he could not name, and had stopped trying to. The dinner is Saturday, he said. 60 guests. Her oldest friends. The whole family. For 2 months she's been asking me if I am bringing someone. I have run out of answers that are not lies. So you decided to pay someone, Grace said. I decided to ask someone, he said. There is a difference between deciding and asking. She considered that. And the women in your life who might do this for free? He looked at her steadily. The women in my life who would do this for free would also use it for purposes I am not in a position to manage right now. My grandmother is not well. I do not want her last months surrounded by performance and calculation. He paused. I have enough of both in my working life. Grace was quiet listening. I am also aware, he said, of how this sounds. I am aware of exactly how it sounds. A man with my name and my resources standing in a corridor at midnight asking a woman he had never spoken to pretend to care about him. He said it without self-pity, which was the only way she could have stood to hear it. I am telling you the truth because it is the only thing that makes this possible to ask. What does the arrangement look like? She said. Specifically. Saturday dinner, he said. 1 month of public appearances, photographs, perhaps 1 or 2 family lunches. Whatever makes it believable to the people who need to believe it. And then a quiet ending that does not make her worse, and does not make the newspapers. And in private? In private you go home to your house every night, and I go home to mine. That is not negotiable from my side, and I would not insult you by making it otherwise. I want that in writing, she said. I expected that. With a lawyer. Tonight. I have one I can call. And I read every line myself. I do not sign anything I have not read. Agreed. And the money before Saturday, she said. All of it. I will not perform on a promise. He nodded once. Done. Grace was quiet for a moment. She was running numbers in her head. Not just 50,000 sadies as a number, but 50,000 sadies as a specific set of things. Her mother's shop rent in Kumasi that had gone up in January, and that her mother had mentioned 3 times in ways that were meant to sound like not mentioning it. Her brother Kevin's final year exam fees at NUST that were due at the end of the month. The school uniform her landlady's daughter needed, and that her landlady had not asked for, but that Grace had seen the woman looking at the price of, and looking away. 50,000 sadies was not a number. It was a list of things that would finally stop being problems. I have conditions, she said. He looked at her. 3 of them, she said. If you say no to anyone, I go back to my floor. Go ahead. The money is paid in full before I stand in front of one single person. Not after. Not in parts. Before. Done. You do not touch me. Not in a car. Not at a table. Not in a corridor. If the situation requires something specific, your hand on my back for a photograph, something a camera needs, we agree to it in advance, and it is only what we agree. Nothing else. I will not touch you outside of what we specifically agree a situation requires. You have my word. Third. She stopped. She looked at the wall for a moment, and then looked back at him. My mother is in Kumasi. She sells fabric. She is not a woman who travels often, but she hears things and people talk to her, and she will hear about this. She raised me alone after my father died when I was 14, and she has worked hard every single day I have been alive, and she has never once had a reason to be ashamed of me or to doubt me. She must not know that this is a business arrangement. Not during it. Not after it. Not in 10 years. He was very still. Why? He said. And he asked it as a real question, not a challenge. Because she is my mother, Grace said. And that is the one I will not bend on. The money we can argue. This one, no. He held her eyes. Agreed. Then write it down, she said. All of it. On paper. With a lawyer tonight. He reached into his pocket and brought out his phone. Mr. Asante arrived at 12:40. He came into the building with his tie already loosened and his laptop bag under his arm, and the expression of a man who had been in this profession long enough to have made peace with impossible hours. He was perhaps 55. He had gray at his temples and reading glasses in his breast pocket, and the practiced calm of someone who had sat in rooms where large amounts of money were being moved and had learned not to let his face reflect the amounts. He sat up at the small conference table on the 4th floor and began typing and speaking to Adrian about structures and clauses, and Grace sat at the end of the table in her work uniform and waited. Mr. Asani did not look at her once in the first 15 minutes. He spoke to Adrian as though Adrian were the only person in the room, which was something she had encountered before in official settings and had long since stopped letting trouble her. When he slid the first draft across the table to Adrian, Adrian pushed it directly down to Grace without looking at it himself. She read it slowly, with the care she gave to anything that required it. She had left secondary school at 14 when her father died, and the money for fees went away. But she had never stopped reading. The library on Accra Road had been her school for the years after, and she had read everything in it that interested her, which was most of it, and she had developed the habit of reading difficult things twice, once to get the meaning, and once to find the thing the meaning was hiding. She read the contract twice. Then she put her finger on a paragraph on page 3. This says indemnify, she said to Mr. Asante. Explain it to me in plain language. Mr. Asante looked up. He looked at her properly for the first time. Not to me like I am a lawyer, she said. To me like I am a person who needs to understand what I am agreeing to. He explained it. She listened. She said the explanation was clearer than the paragraph, and the paragraph should be replaced with the explanation. He looked at Adrian. Do what she says, Adrian said. He had not looked up from his own copy. She read the revision. She found another clause on page 5 that she did not like, a line about termination that gave the paying party too much flexibility. She pointed to it. She explained what she did not like about it. Mr. Asante began to argue the legal standard position and she let him finish, and then said she understood the standard position and was not accepting it in this case, and Adrian said again, without looking up, do what she says, Asante, and the clause was changed. She signed the final version at 1:47 in the morning. The transfer notification arrived on her phone at 1:52. She read the number. She read it again. She turned the phone off and put it in her uniform pocket. She stood up. She shook Mr. Asani's hand. He shook it back firmly this time and looked at her with something in his face she recognized as respect, which people often forgot to offer, and which she accepted without comment when they remembered. Good night, she said. Good night, madam, he said. She went back to the 7th floor and finished her remaining rooms. She did not rush. She did the work the way she always did it, properly, in order, without skipping. The contract was signed, and the money was in the account, and none of that changed what her job was tonight and what it required. She finished at 3:45. She collected her trolley. She went down in the service lift. Adrian was in the lobby. She had not expected that. He was sitting in one of the lobby chairs with his jacket on now, covering the torn collar, and he stood up when the lift opened. I wanted to make sure you got out safely, he said. She looked at him. Sir, I have been getting out of this building safely for 3 years and 4 months. I know, he said. I wanted to this time. She did not know what to do with that, so she walked past him and out into the night air, which was cool and smelled of the city settling into itself. My driver will take you, he said behind her. I take the trotro. At 4 in the morning. At 4 in the morning, she said. Good night, sir. She walked to the road. She heard him stand at the door for a moment. Then the door closed. She stood at the trotro stop with her bag and her uniform and 50,000 cedis in her account, and thought about her mother's shop rent and her brother's exam fees, and said nothing to anyone about any of it. Adrian sent his personal assistant to her apartment the next morning. Her name was Evelyn. She was perhaps 38, wore a gray suit every day in what appeared to be rotation with other gray suits, carried a tablet and a folder, and spoke in the precise tones of a woman who had managed complicated things for a long time and was very good at it. She arrived at Grace's apartment in Asylum down at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning and looked around the single room, the careful arrangement of it, the small chest of drawers, the 2 pairs of shoes by the door, the shelf of books above the bed, and she said nothing about any of it, which Grace respected. She said simply, "We have 24 hours. Let me tell you what we need to do." They sat at the small table, and Evelyn opened her folder. The dinner is at the family house in East Legan. 60 guests, 40 family, 20 of Grandma Rose's oldest friends. These are the names you need to know. She turned the folder around. A list. Photographs beside each name. These 5 are the most important. She tapped 5 photographs. These are the aunties. They will ask you questions. They are not trying to hurt you. They are trying to understand you. And with this family, those are the same thing. Grace looked at the photographs. 5 women, ranging in age from perhaps 55 to 70. Strong faces. The kind of women who had built things and were not impressed by things. And this one. Evelyn tapped a 6th photograph. The man in it was perhaps 40. Good-looking. The kind of good-looking that knew it was good-looking. Felix Danso-Boateng. Adrian's cousin. He has been managing his position with Grandma Rose for 2 years. He will be pleasant to you. He will be very pleasant. Do not mistake pleasant for friendly. Grace looked at the photograph. She understood the face immediately. She had encountered versions of it in different buildings and different uniforms. The smile that arrived too fast and stayed too long. "What does he want?" she said. "The company," Evelyn said simply. "He believes that if Grandma Rose sees Adrian as unsettled, her word for men who have not built a family, she will begin to listen to his suggestions about the future structure of the board. He has been very patient about it." She closed the folder. Now, the dress. There was a box on the bed. Grace had noticed it when Evelyn came in, but had not said anything. Evelyn opened it. Inside, in white tissue paper, was a dress. Deep green. Simple but exact, the kind of simplicity that costs more than decoration. Grace looked at it. She did not ask how much it cost. She had learned from looking at shoes with Evelyn earlier that morning that asking how much things cost in Adrian Danso-Boateng's world was the kind of thing that required sitting down afterwards. "It is yours," Evelyn said. "After Saturday, keep it." Grace put her hand on the fabric. Good weight. Good lining. The kind of dress that would last 20 years if you treated it carefully. Evelyn set a shoe box beside it. Grace did not ask the price. She had learned that lesson already this morning. She thought, "I will treat it carefully." They worked all of Friday. Evelyn taught her the family history the way a good teacher teaches, not with dates and figures, but with the things that made the dates matter. Adrian's father, Emmanuel, she said, built this company from nothing. But the thing you need to know about Emmanuel is not the company. It is that he never once told his son he was proud of him. Not once in 33 years. Adrian knows this. It is why he works the way he works and why he cannot stop. That is the root of everything in that family. If Grandma Rose brings up his father, you do not fill the silence. You let Adrian fill it himself. Adrian's mother had died when Adrian was 11. A car accident on the Kumasi Road. Grandma Rose had raised Adrian herself after that, which was why the relationship between them was what it was, not just grandmother and grandson, but something with more weight than that, the kind of relationship that forms when 2 people are all each other has for a time. "She will ask you about your father," Evelyn said. "And your mother. She reads people through their parents. She believes you cannot understand a tree without understanding the roots." "My father drove a bus," Grace said. "Accra to Takoradi, 6 days a week for 18 years. He died when I was 14. An accident near us in Krangwa. The truck came across the road." Evelyn wrote nothing down. She just listened. "My mother has sold fabric at Kumasi Central Market since I was 3 years old. Her legs have been bad since my brother was born. She does not complain about them." "Do you have other siblings?" "One brother. Kevin. He is 23. Final year at NUST. Engineering." "And after your father died?" Grace was quiet for a moment. "After my father died, my mother sold the bus. It did not cover the funeral costs. I left school in JSS 3. I worked. Various things. Cleaning was steady. Night shift suited me because I could attend church in the mornings and look for other work in the afternoons, in the beginning. After a while I stopped looking for other work. This was the work." Evelyn looked at her. "You do not need to say any of that at the dinner unless you choose to," she said. "I know," Grace said. "But it is the truth. And you told me Grandma Rose reads people through their roots." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, she does. I think you will be fine." Adrian collected her at 6:30 on Saturday evening. He came to the gate of her building in a car that was the color of charcoal and got out himself, no driver, and stood beside it. He was in a dark suit that had been pressed with a kind of precision that suggested someone else had pressed it. He looked at her and she came through the gate, and he went still for just a moment. "Ready?" she said. "Not particularly," he said. "You?" She had spent 3 years alone in buildings at midnight with only the sound of her own work for company. She had buried her father at 14 and stood at his graveside dry-eyed because her mother could not stop crying, and one of them had to be steady. She had sat in government offices and hospital waiting rooms and bank branches where people behind counters looked at her like a number and not a person, and she held herself straight in all of them. "I will manage," she said. He opened the car door. They drove. The city at night was the city at night, the heat not entirely gone, the street lights making orange pools on the road, the hawkers at the junctions holding up their goods to every stopped car. The church is still lit at 6:30 because in Accra there was always a service for something. She looked at it all and felt the familiar feeling she always had driving through the city at night, that it was too much and exactly enough at the same time. He did not give her instructions in the car. She had expected instructions. He drove and she looked at the city, and the silence between them was, unexpectedly, comfortable. Like the silence in a room where two people are reading. "She will try to hold your hand," he said, when they were perhaps 10 minutes away. "My grandmother." Both hands. She does it with everyone she is deciding about. She holds your hands and she looks at your face and she is making a decision, and she does not hide that she is making it. "All right," Grace said. "And she will ask about your people." She means family, roots, where you come from. She is not being intrusive. It is how she understands a person. "You told Evelyn to tell me to be honest," Grace said. "I told Evelyn to tell you to be yourself," he said. "Which I believe is the same thing in your case." She turned to look at him. He was watching the road. "That is a thing you decided from one conversation in a corridor," she said. "Two conversations," he said. "The corridor. And the contract table." He glanced at her briefly. "You made Asante rewrite a clause at 1 in the morning, and he has never had a client make him do that before, including me. He told me so on the phone this afternoon." Grace looked back at the road. She said nothing, but something settled slightly in her chest. The particular settling that happens when a person has been seen accurately. The Danso Boateng family house in East Legon was the kind of house that had been built before houses in East Legon became statements. It was large but not theatrical. The compound was walled, and the garden inside the wall had mango trees, and a frangipani that had clearly been there for decades, and a lawn that was cut very precisely, the kind of precise that said someone cared about it daily. There were cars already parked along the driveway. Lights in every window. The sound of voices and music from inside. Not party music. Something softer. The kind of music that is background to conversation. Adrian stopped at the entrance. He did not move immediately. "One more thing," he said. She waited. "What happened last night? The stairwell. My hand. That was Felix." "Not directly. Something he said about my father. About decisions my father made in the last years of his life, and whether they were the right ones." He kept his eyes forward. "I am telling you this because you will see him tonight, and I do not want you to see him without knowing." Grace looked at Adrian's profile in the dark of the car. The set of his jaw. The steadiness of it. "Did your father make the right decisions?" She said. "Yes," he said. Without hesitation. "Then Felix is wrong," she said simply. "And you know it. Which means what he says should not be able to reach you." A pause. "It reaches me through my grandmother," he said quietly. "Because she is the one who is still here. And she is the one who is listening." Grace nodded. She understood that. She understood it exactly. "Come on," she said. "Let us go in." Grandma Rose Danso Boateng was smaller than Grace had expected. The history was so large. The stall, the warehouse, the decades of building, that Grace had assembled a large person from it in her mind, without meaning to. But the woman who sat near the entrance of the main reception room was small, with a face that had folded into its years without apology, and eyes that were entirely and completely awake. She was wearing a Kent cloth of gold and green, and she sat in a high-backed chair and received her guests the way a chief receives visitors, which was not arrogance. It was simply the posture of a woman who had never had the luxury of waiting for permission to occupy a space. When Adrian came through the door, she lit up. It was involuntary and total. Whatever controlled expression she was maintaining disappeared for 2 full seconds. "Adrian." She opened her arms. He went to her and held her with a care that Grace could see from across the room. The care you use with something that matters and that you know is not infinite. Then Grandma Rose looked past him. At Grace. She looked for a long moment. Then she said, "Come. Come and let me see you." Grace came. She stood before her, and Grandma Rose reached out and took both her hands, both, exactly as Adrian had said, and held them, and looked at her face with the direct, unhurried attention of a woman who had been reading people for 80 years and was very good at it. "What is your name?" she said. "Grace, Grandma." "Grace." She said it with the full weight of it. "You are Fiancée?" "My mother is, Grandma. My father was a Santi." Grandma Rose held the hands and looked at her face. "And what do you do, Grace?" The room was not silent. There were 60 people and all of them talking, but the immediate space had gone attentive. Grace could feel it without looking. "I clean offices, Grandma," she said. Grandma Rose's eyebrows went up. Just slightly. Not judgment. The pure interest of a woman who had not expected that answer. "Which building?" she said. "This one's," Grace said. She did not gesture. She did not need to. Grandma Rose understood immediately. And something moved in her face, a shifting of something deep, a recognition that was not pity and not amusement, and was not any of the things Grace had prepared herself for. It was something closer to seeing. The way one person looks at another when they recognize something of themselves, even distantly, even differently arranged. "Sit here," Grandma Rose said. And she pointed to the chair on her immediate left. Not across the room. Right beside her. "Adrian, go. You have family to greet. You have had this woman all week. Go." Laughter from the nearest aunties. Adrian looked at Grace. Grace sat down. He went. They talked for nearly an hour. Not about Adrian. Not about the arrangement or the company, or the family dynamics that were visible to anyone paying attention. They talked about Makola Market and Kumasi Central Market, and what the markets had been in the 80s and what they had become, and what was lost in the change, and what was not. Grandma Rose asked about her mother, not as a formality, but as a genuine inquiry, the kind you make when you want to understand the root, and not just the branch. Grace told her about the fabric stall and the bad legs and the years of going to the market anyway. "She went with bad legs," Grandma Rose said. "Every day, Grandma." She said the stall did not know her legs were bad, and she was not going to introduce them. Grandma Rose laughed. Fully and suddenly, the kind of laugh that escapes before you can manage it, and it made the people nearest to them turn and look because it was not a sound anyone had heard her make in some time. Then she said, more quietly, "My own legs were bad from the 3rd year of the business. I stood at that stall on Liberation Road. Not this building. This came later, much later. I stood on a concrete floor in flat shoes for 11 years, and my veins know about it." She looked at Grace. "Your mother sent you to school with those legs." "Until she could not," Grace said. "And then she found other ways." "What other ways?" "She taught me to read everything." She said school ends, but reading does not. Grace paused. She was right. Grandma Rose was quiet. Then she took Grace's hand again, just one this time, a different gesture from the first, less assessment, and more simply holding, and she said, "You are not frightened of me." "Grandma, I have been alone in large buildings at midnight for 3 years," Grace said. "I am not easily frightened." Grandma Rose laughed again. Harder this time. She pressed her free hand to her chest and laughed. "Good," she said, when it settled. "Very good." Across the room, Adrian was watching them. He was in conversation with 2 of the older family friends, but his eyes were on his grandmother's face. Grace could see, even from across the room, the exact moment he registered that she was laughing. Something in him went quiet in a good way. The way a person goes quiet when something they have been holding loosens. The dinner was long and full. The table was set for the full 60, and the food was the kind of food that takes 2 days to prepare. Light soup that had clearly been started Thursday. Kontomeyer stew. Jollof rice that had the crust at the bottom that told you it was done right. Grilled tilapia. Fried plantain at exactly the right ripeness. The aunties had been involved in the cooking, which you could tell because there was too much of everything, and all of it was excellent. Grace was seated beside Adrian, across from 2 of the aunties, and next to a family friend from Cape Coast who had known Grandma Rose since they were girls selling groundnuts in their school uniforms. The family friend talked continuously and warmly and asked no questions that felt like tests, which was a relief after the alertness of the dinner table. The first auntie to ask a pointed question was Auntie Ruth, a broad, warm woman wearing a headscarf the color of a sunset. "So, my dear," she said, setting down her fork, "where are your people from?" "The family house," Grace answered. "Kumasi on her mother's side. Her father's people were from a village outside Asankrangwa." "Ah, Asankrangwa." Auntie Ruth turned to the woman beside her. "You know the Mensa family from there?" "I do not know many people from there," Grace said. "We left when I was very young. After my father passed." The table made the sound tables make. A collective softening. "Sorry, my dear," Auntie Ruth said. "Your father, what did he do?" He drove buses. Auntie. Akrata takarati. A pause. Not unkind. The kind of pause that is simply the moment before the next sentence. And your mother? She sells fabric. Kumasi Central Market. A market woman. Auntie Ruth nodded slowly, turning this over. A hard-working woman. Market women are not afraid of work. No, Auntie, Grace said. They are not. Across the table, the second auntie, quieter, watching everything, said, And you went to school where, Grace? Here it was. Grace had known it was coming. She had thought about how to say it and decided the only way was directly. I left school in JSS 3. Auntie, she said. After my father died, there was no money for fees. A brief silence. Felix, who was 3 seats down, went very still. Grace noticed without looking directly. But you read, Grandma Rose said from the head of the table. She had been listening to everything, quietly from her seat. Grace reads. She told me about it. Yes, Grandma, Grace said. What do you read? The quiet auntie asked. Genuinely curious now. History, Grace said. Business. Whatever is at the library on Accra Road. I used to go 3 times a week when I was first in the city. She paused. I read the contracts I sign now very carefully. Mr. Asandi can confirm that. There was a surprised ripple of laughter. Even the quiet auntie smiled. Adrian, beside her, did not laugh. But his hand, which had been resting on the table, moved very slightly toward her, and then stopped, which she noticed and said nothing about. Then Felix spoke. He had been waiting. Grace had felt the waiting the way you feel a change in pressure before rain. Grace, he said pleasantly. He had a very pleasant voice. How did you and Adrian meet? He has been very mysterious about it. The table's attention shifted. He was having a difficult evening, Grace said. I was working. He needed something and I helped him. What kind of something? Felix said. Still pleasant. Still smiling. A first aid kit, she said. A pause. Felix had not expected that answer. A first aid kit. He hurt his hand, she said. I had the kit in my supply closet. It was a simple thing. You keep a supply closet at the office? He said. I keep a supply closet in the building where I work, she said. Yes. Another pause. The room was doing the calculation, the building where she works, and arriving at the answer. Felix's smile stayed exactly where it was. Of course, he said warmly. What a lovely story. And he turned to speak to the person beside him, and the conversation moved, and Grace went back to her tilapia. Under the table, she pressed her hands together in her lap, and breathed out slowly. She had survived it. That was what she thought. She had answered every question, and not lied and not been made smaller. Then she heard Grandma Rose set down her glass. Not tapping it. Simply placing it on the cloth. But the particular quiet of the gesture made the table settle. Grace, my dear, she said. Grace looked up. You remind me of a girl I knew 50 years ago, Grandma Rose said. She used to come to my stall at Macola and look at the cloth but never buy because she could not afford it, and she never pretended she was looking for something else. She just looked and said good afternoon, and went away. 20 years later, she came back with her own stall 3 rows down, and she was my competition for 15 years, and I respected her more than almost anyone I have ever known in business. The table was very quiet. That girl knew what things cost, Grandma Rose said. Every single thing. She looked at Grace. You know what things cost. It was not a question. Yes, Grandma, Grace said. Grandma Rose nodded once. She picked up her glass again. The table exhaled. And Felix, 3 seats down, looked at his plate with the expression of a man who had come to a dinner expecting to win something and had not. In the car afterwards, driving back through the city, neither of them spoke for a long time. The dinner had ended well. Or rather it had ended correctly, which was different from well, but was enough. Grandma Rose had embraced Grace at the door and held her for a moment, and said in her ear, Come back. Not as a formality. As a standing instruction. The city moved past the windows. The highway was clear at this hour. She likes you, Adrian said finally. I know, Grace said. You said you would know. From the beginning. That she would tell you. She held my hand the second time, Grace said. The first time was assessment. The second time she just held it. That was different. He was quiet. Does it bother you? He said. What Felix implied about the building. No. I know what I do. I have known what I do for 3 years and 4 months, and I have never been ashamed of it for one day. She looked out of the window. What Felix did was try to make me feel that I should be ashamed of it. That is not the same thing as the work itself. My grandmother said you know what things cost, he said after a moment. Your grandmother is right. What did she mean, do you think? Specifically. Grace thought about it. She meant that I have had to know. That I have not had the option of not knowing. Every price of everything, fabric, bus fare, school fees, medicine, funerals, I have had to know it exactly because there was never a margin for getting it wrong. She paused. She knows that kind of knowing. She started from it. Adrian nodded slowly. He drove. The roads were dark and long. She said she wants you to come back, he said. I heard her. She does not say that to people she does not mean it to. I know, Grace said. And she found that she wanted to go back. That it was not the arrangement that made her want to go back. That Grandma Rose, in her gold and green Kent, with the full laugh and the hand that held properly, that person was worth going back to. She turned to the window and said nothing else. The weeks that followed were the strange ones. There were 2 photographs for a society magazine, a Sunday morning, a garden somewhere in cantonments, a photographer who asked them stand close and to look at each other, and they stood close and looked at each other, and the photographer said perfect, which was odd, because neither of them had performed anything. There was a family lunch on the 3rd Sunday. There was the funeral of Grandma Rose's oldest friend, a woman of 83 who had been selling imported lace at Macola since before Ghana's independence, who died on a Tuesday and was buried on a Friday, and Adrian called Grace and said he had to go and did not want to go alone, and she said yes without hesitation because she understood what funerals required. And somewhere inside those weeks, the line between the arrangement and something else began to move. She could not have told you the specific day. It was not a day. It was the accumulation of small things. It was the Tuesday he called her at 7 in the evening just to tell her that Grandma Rose had eaten a full dinner. Not to report, not because the arrangement required it, just because he had been carrying the information and wanted to give it to someone who would understand why it mattered. It was the Thursday she told him about her father. She had not planned to. They were in the car, coming back from the second family event, and he asked her what her father had been like, not as part of the script, just asked, and she told him. The bus. The routes. The way he had smelled of engine oil when he came home. The way he had made her read the newspaper to him in the evenings, not because he could not read but because he liked the sound of her voice and did not say so and she knew anyway. Adrian listened to the whole thing without saying anything until she finished. He sounds like a man who paid attention to the quiet things, he said. She had not expected that. It was exactly right and she had not expected it. She said nothing for a moment. Then yes. That is exactly what he was. It was the Saturday she took him to Kumasi. She had not planned to take him to Kumasi. The arrangement did not require it. But her mother had called twice in a week, and the second call had questions in it that were shaped like not questions, the way her mother asked things when she had already heard something and was waiting for the proper account. And Grace had thought, I would rather show her than explain. She told Adrian on a Wednesday evening that she was going to Kumasi on Saturday, and he said he would drive her. She said she had not asked him to drive her. He said he knew that. She said if he came he would have to sit in her mother's shop and answer hard questions about money and God and his intentions. He said he preferred people who ask hard questions. She looked at him for a moment and said all right, Saturday, 6 in the morning. He was at the gate at 5:55. The drive to Kumasi was 4 hours with a stop for Kenki at a roadside spot outside Nkaka that Grace had been stopping at since she was a child traveling with her father, and she told Adrian this. And he ate the Kenki without complaint and declared it the best he had eaten outside of Grandma Rose's kitchen, which she suspected was exaggerated but appreciated. Her mother's fabric shop was on a street that ran off the central market. It was not large. It was arranged with the precision of a woman who had learned that small spaces only feel small if you do not organize them. The bolts of fabric were ordered by color along the left wall. The samples were on a rack by the window. The small desk at the back where her mother kept the accounts was clean and exact. Dorothy Mensah was 56. She was shorter than Grace and had Grace's eyes and the legs that had given her trouble for 15 years, and that she never mentioned because mentioning them gave them more power than they had earned. She was behind the counter when they came in, and she looked at her daughter, and then at the man behind her daughter, and her face did its quick reading, the thorough, unhurried kind, and then she said, "Come in. Sit down." She put Adrian in the chair across from the counter. The plastic chair, slightly uneven on the tiled floor. She did not offer the better chair. She gave him the testing chair, and he sat in it without noticing the difference or without caring, and that was the first thing in his favor. She gave Grace the job of making tea in the small back room. This was deliberate. This was her mother saying, "I would like to speak to this man without you present." Grace went and made the tea and took her time making it. When she came back, her mother was asking him about his mother. How she had died. what she had been like, whether he remembered her clearly. I remember her in pieces, he said. He was looking at his hands, which were resting on his knees. The smell of her. The way she said my name when she was not angry. She had a different way from when she was angry. Her handwriting. She left me a note once, inside a book she gave me for my birthday, and I have kept the book because of the note. He looked up. Those are the pieces I have. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. And your father? My father was a builder, Adrian said. In the other sense. He built things, and when he could not build anymore, he did not know what to do. And that was the problem at the end. But he was a good man. He was not always a good father, but he was a good man, and I've spent 3 years learning to understand the difference. Dorothy poured her tea. She poured his. She poured Grace's without looking at her. Then she said, "Why my daughter?" Simply. Directly. The question underneath all the other questions. Adrian did not answer immediately. He looked at the fabric on the wall. He looked at the accounts desk. He looked at Grace. Because she is the most honest person I have met in a very long time, he said. And I did not know I was looking for that until I found it. And now that I have found it, I am not willing to pretend I have not. Dorothy looked at him for a long time. She has never had it easy, she said. I know, he said. Do you really know? Or do you know the way people say they know things they have only heard about? I know the way a person knows when they pay attention, he said. I have been paying attention. Dorothy looked at her daughter. Grace looked back and worked very hard to keep her face steady, and did not fully succeed, and her mother saw it, and looked back at the man in the plastic chair. Come back, she said. Not an invitation. A standing instruction. He came back. Twice more before the month was finished. He brought nothing both times. No gifts, no gestures, and sat in the plastic chair and answered questions. Her mother asked him about money the second time in detail. What happened to it? How he made decisions about it? Whether he understood that money was a tool and not a personality. He answered all of it directly. He did not make himself larger than he was. The third visit, her mother made him soup. That was all Grace needed to know about what her mother had decided. Felix found her alone at the third family event. It was a Sunday lunch. Just the family, perhaps 20 people. He came to stand beside her at the drinks table with a smile that had been warming up for some time. Grace, he said warmly. I feel I have not properly introduced myself. We have only met across dinner tables. We met at the birthday dinner, she said. You asked me how Adrian and I met. I did. He did not stop smiling. I was curious. I am still curious, honestly. My cousin is a private person. He does not often bring people into the family. He brought me, she said. He did. Felix adjusted his cufflinks. I want you to know that I have no issue with that. I think it is wonderful. Grandma Rose is very happy. He paused. I just want to make sure that you understand the weight of what you are entering. This family has a history. A name. And names in the city carry obligations. I grew up in the city, Grace said. I understand names. Of course. He was still smiling. I only mean, a woman in your position. Coming into this, it can be overwhelming. The scrutiny. The history. People will look for things. Let them look, she said. I am exactly what I appear to be. That is what I told myself when I did my own research, he said pleasantly. And I found exactly that. Nothing to find. Very clean. He paused. It is almost unusual. Grace looked at him directly. You researched me. I was thorough, he said. Without apology. It is how I am. And you found nothing. Nothing. She picked up her drink. Then I'm not sure what this conversation is. He was quiet for just a moment, the first gap in the smoothness. It is a friendly warning, he said. From someone who knows this family. Thank you, Grace said. The fish looks good today. And she walked toward the food table. Adrian appeared at her shoulder a minute later. What did he say? That he researched me and found nothing. A pause. He researched you. He told me himself. I believe he told me himself so that I would understand he was capable of it. She took a piece of fish. He found nothing. So now he is telling me he found nothing as a warning. It means the next step is to create something. Adrian was very still beside her. What do you mean? He cannot find a real problem. So he will make one. Or he will wait for one to arrive. She ate the fish. It was very good. We should be careful. Adrian looked across the room at his cousin, who was now in conversation with two of the Andes, smiling fully. I am sorry, Adrian said, for bringing this to your door. You warned me at the first dinner, she said. I went in with my eyes open. That was the whole point. He looked at her. Still, she agreed. Now eat something. The Kontamire is excellent. The public moment came 3 days later. It was at the Danso Boteng Foundation annual luncheon. Not a family event. A professional one. 120 people. Board members, executives, partners. The kind of room where reputations were made and unmade over dessert. Adrian had been attending this luncheon every year since he was 22. Grace had not known about it until Evelyn sent the schedule on a Tuesday morning with a single line underneath. This one matters more than the others. She had asked Evelyn why. Because Felix will be there, Evelyn said. And because your arrangement ends in 2 weeks. And because everybody in that room has heard about you, and none of them have decided what they think yet. This is where they decide. Grace wore the deep green dress. She had treated it carefully, as she had promised herself she would, and it had rewarded her. She walked into that room beside Adrian, and she kept her chin level and her back straight the way she had been taught. And she felt the room adjust the way rooms always adjusted when something unexpected entered them. For the first hour it was fine. People shook her hand. A woman on the board asked about her work, and Grace told her exactly what she did, and the woman nodded with a particular nod of someone recalibrating their assumptions, which was becoming a familiar thing to receive, and Grace had stopped finding it uncomfortable. Then the speeches began. The foundation chairman spoke first. Then a representative from one of the partner organizations. Then Felix stood up. He had not been announced as a speaker. That was the first thing Grace noticed. The chairman looked briefly to his left when Felix rose, a small involuntary look, the kind that meant this was not on the program. But Felix was already at the microphone, and he was smiling the smile that arrived too fast, and Grace felt the room shift in the way a room shifts when it understands that something is about to happen that was not planned. Felix thanked the chairman. He thanked the partners. He spoke warmly about the foundation's history, about what it meant to the family, about legacy. He used the word legacy 4 times. Then he paused, and in the pause he looked across the room at Grace, and the look was warm and completely deliberate. I want to take a moment, he said pleasantly, to acknowledge the newest member of our family. He smiled at Grace. We have all been following Adrian's story with great happiness. He looked at Adrian. We want the best for him. The family wants the best for him. And we believe, truly, that the right partner for a man in Adrian's position should be someone who understands what this family has built, what it costs to build it, what it requires to protect it. The room was very still. He did not say anything else directly. He did not need to. The implication sat in the room like something physical. A woman who cleans our building. A woman we hired. A woman who has been paid. Is that the partner who understands what we have built? Grace put her glass down on the table in front of her. She put it down carefully, without sound, and she folded her hands in her lap, and looked at the tablecloth and breathed. She heard Adrian's chair move. He stood up slowly. He did not reach for a microphone. He simply stood, and the room, which had been braced for something, went completely silent because the quality of his standing was different from Felix's standing, and everyone in that room knew the difference between a man performing authority and a man who actually had it. Felix, he said. His voice was conversational. Not loud. Not angry. The kind of voice that does not need to be either. Thank you for the kind words. Felix smiled. Of course. Adrian looked at his cousin for a moment. Then he looked out at the room. I want to tell you something about Grace, he said. Not about who she is to me, because that is between us and this is not the venue for it. He paused. I want to tell you about the night I met her. He told them. All of it. The stairwell. The torn collar. The blood on his hand. A woman alone on the 7th floor at 11:15 at night who said good evening like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, who cleaned the cut on his hand with antiseptic from a supply closet she kept stocked because that was her job and she did her job properly, who then asked him to give her 5 minutes to finish her remaining rooms before she would hear what he had to say. This building, he said, has 112 employees. He looked at the room. I could not have told you the name of one person who works the night shift before that evening. He let that sit. Not because I am a bad person. Because I was not paying attention to the people who kept this place running while I was asleep. Nobody moved. Grace did not pay me that inattention, he said. She knew when the executive lift stopped moving. She knew the corridor lights on the 3rd floor flickered. She knew a window on the 2nd floor let in a draft that nobody on the day shift had ever noticed. He paused. She knew this building better than I did. She had been inside it longer than most of my board members. He looked at Felix. What she understands, he said, is exactly what this family built from. Not from the top of the tower. From the ground. From the work that nobody sees and nobody thanks you for, and that still needs to be done. He straightened slightly. That is not a disqualification. That is the whole qualification. He sat down. The room was silent for a moment that was long enough to feel. Then the chairman, a woman in her 60s who had known Emmanuel Danso Boateng since 1991, began to clap. It started at the chairman's table and moved outward, and it was not the polite applause of a managed room. It was the specific applause of people who had just watched someone say something true. Felix remained standing at the microphone for 2 seconds longer than was comfortable. Then he sat down. Grace did not look at him. She looked at her hands in her lap for a moment. Then she looked up and across the table at Adrian, who had not looked at her since he sat down because he was looking at the room the way you look at a room when you have just said something that cost you something, and you are waiting to find out if it was worth it. She looked at him until he turned. He looked back. Under the table, out of sight of the 120 people who were still processing what had just happened, she reached across and put her hand on his. Just for a second. Just long enough. Then she picked up her glass and drank her water, and listened to the next speaker begin, and the luncheon continued. And the city outside the windows went on being the city, and nothing looked different. Everything was different. The problem came on a Monday morning. Grace's phone rang at 6:45 while she was still in her uniform from the night shift, sitting on the edge of her bed with her shoes off, eating the bread she had bought from the woman at the trotro stop. Her brother Kevin's name was on the screen. She answered. There was a pause before he spoke. The kind of pause that was not a bad connection. Sis, he said. Kevin. What happened? Nothing bad, he said quickly. Everybody is fine. But there is a thing. At school. Something happened. She put the bread down. Tell me. There had been an incident in his student residence 3 weeks ago. A fight between 2 students over a laptop that had gone missing. Kevin had not been involved and had not taken anything. He had been in the common room when it started, tried to separate them, and was taken in with the others when campus security arrived. The laptop had been found and returned, and the matter cleared up. But the disciplinary process moved slowly, and a blogger covering campus affairs had found the report with his name in it. The piece, Kevin said, is already up. Since this morning. I am sending you the link now. Grace opened it. She read it. Billionaire's girlfriend's brother held in campus theft case. There was a photograph of Kevin from his university ID. There was her name. There was Adrian's name. There were already 400 comments. She closed it. You were not involved, she said. I was not involved, he said. I swear to you. I was there, that is all. I believe you, she said. She said it immediately, without hesitation, because she did. She knew her brother. She knew the precise shape of when he was lying. He had been a bad liar since he was 6 years old, and she had spent 23 years learning the tells. And this was not it. Does Mama know? She said. She called me 10 minutes ago, he said. She had already seen it. She was not crying. That was worse than if she had been crying. Grace closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them. Do not speak to anyone else, she said. Not a comment, not a message, nothing. I am handling it. She ended the call and called Adrian. He answered on the second ring. She told him everything without leaving anything out, because she was a person who dealt in exact information, and she was not going to change that because the information was uncomfortable. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, he was not involved. No. You are certain. I am certain, she said. I know my brother. All right, he said. Give me an hour. I do not want this buried by your name or your money, she said. I want it corrected by the truth. Publicly. Whatever it takes. That is exactly what it will be, he said. Give me an hour. He called back in 50 minutes. Mr. Asandi had obtained the full incident report through official channels. The report confirmed that Kevin had been recorded as present, but not as a suspect, and had been released without any finding against him. The blogger was contacted directly with the official report and a formal correction request. By that afternoon, the post had been taken down and replaced with a retraction. By evening, the retraction had twice as many views as the original piece, because the truth had been louder. Grace called her brother. It is handled, she said. Tell me one more time. I was not involved, he said. His voice was very quiet. Good, she said. Call Mama. She called Adrian back. She did not say thank you immediately. She sat with it for a moment first. Thank you, she said. It was the truth, he said. The truth was already there. We just made sure it was the loudest thing in the room. She was quiet. She thought about her mother picking up the phone that morning, seeing her daughter's name next to the word scandal. The 10 minutes before Grace called back during which her mother had sat with that alone. He is a good boy, she said finally. He has always been a good boy. He just ends up in the wrong places. Not from bad intention. From the wrong kind of loyalty. He stays when other people would leave. That is not a bad quality, Adrian said. No, she agreed. But it is a dangerous one when the world does not reward it. She heard him breathe. He will be all right, Grace. She looked at the wall of her apartment. The single room. The careful arrangement of it. I know, she said. But my mother sat with that headline for 10 minutes this morning, and I cannot give that back to her. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. You cannot. I am sorry. She nodded, even though he could not see it. Then she put the phone down and sat in the quiet for a long time before she was ready to move. There was a fight. Of course there was a fight. There always is. It happened on a Thursday, and it happened over almost nothing, because the things that have been building for a while do not wait for significant causes. They come out through whatever door is open. Evelyn had sent the schedule for the following week, and the schedule had Grace at a hotel opening on Thursday evening. Grace said she could not go on Thursday. Adrian said why not. She said Wednesday and Thursday were the evenings she called her mother, and this week she needed to call early both days because her mother had a doctor's appointment on Wednesday morning, and she wanted to hear the result, and then call again Thursday to follow up. Send the driver to your mother, Adrian said. She can call you from the car. Grace put down the glass she was holding. The driver, she said. Her voice was even. To take her to the appointment. So you do not have to rearrange things. She does not need your driver, Grace said. She has been getting to her appointments on her own for 15 years. I know that, he said. I only meant to help. I know what you meant, she said. And now her voice was not even. You meant that a hotel opening is worth more than 2 phone calls to my mother, and that money can reorganize anything that is in the way. And that is not how this works, Adrian. He was on his feet now too, across the room from her. That is not what I said. It is what you meant. Grace, he said. Do you know what it takes to call my mother? She said. It was not a shout. It was colder than a shout. Not the phone call itself. The call I make where I have to listen for everything she is not saying. Whether her voice was tired. Whether the pain in her legs was bad that day. Whether she had eaten. My mother did not tell me these things directly. She told me by the way she breathed between sentences. And that requires me to be in a specific place and be still and listen properly. That could not be done in the back of your driver's car on the way to a hotel. The room was very quiet. I hear you, he said. Do not go on Thursday, she said. Let them reschedule. The hotel owner is a board member's cousin, he said. I have been trying to reschedule this for 3 months. Then go by yourself, she said. I am not available. You are being, he started. He stopped. Say it, she said. He looked at her. I know what word you are going to use, she said. Say it if you mean it. He did not say it. She looked at him for a long moment. I am in this arrangement because I chose it, she said. And I have done everything it requires. But I am not in it to become someone who misses her mother's voice for a hotel opening. And if that is what is being asked of me, then the arrangement has changed into something that was not in the contract. He stood across the room and said nothing. I will be available Friday, she said. I will call Evelyn. She picked up her bag. He did not stop her. He called at 11:30 that night. She was awake. She had been awake since she got home, sitting with the lights off in the way she did when something needed to settle before she could sleep. I was going to say difficult, he said. You were right. She said nothing. And you were right that I meant money could reorganize it. I have been using that thinking for so long it has become a reflex. He paused. It is a bad reflex when the thing you are trying to reorganize is not a schedule. I understand that. Yes, she said. I am sorry. She was quiet for a moment. I am also sorry. The way I said it. No, he said. Say it exactly like that. I need it said exactly like that, or I do not hear it. She breathed. All right. How is your mother? I have not called her yet tonight. I will call her tomorrow morning. Just call her. That is enough. There was a long quiet on the line. The kind that is not uncomfortable. The kind that means something has been put down, and both people know it. The city outside her window was settling into its late-night sounds. A generator down the road. A dog somewhere. Adrian, she said. Yes. The month is almost up. He did not answer immediately. I know. We should talk about the statement. The public ending. How we say it. A long pause. Yes, he said. We should. Another pause. Can we do that next week? Why next week? Because, he said. And then he stopped for a long time. I am not ready to have that conversation yet. And I would like to know if that is a problem. She sat in the dark of her room with her phone to her ear. It is not a problem, she said quietly. Good night, Grace. Good night. She put the phone down. She sat for a while longer. Then she lay down and looked at the ceiling and listened to the city outside, and thought about a man who said he was not ready and asked if that was a problem, and waited for the answer, which was not what she had expected from him. But then very little about him had been what she expected. The 2 weeks after that were quieter. Not the quiet of distance. The quiet of two people who have said the hard thing and come out the other side and are still standing, which is its own kind of answer. One evening, 6 days after the fight, she came out of the hospital after visiting her mother and found his car parked across the road. Not his driver. Him. He was leaning against the door with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, and he was not on his phone, which she had learned was unusual for him. She crossed the road. "You did not have to come," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "How long have you been here?" "A while," he said. "I did not want to come inside without being asked. But I did not want you to come out alone either." She stood there on the road outside the hospital with the evening traffic going past, and looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Come and sit with me. There is a bench at the back. The tree there drops flowers in the evening, and it smells good." They sat on the bench under the tree until it was fully dark. They did not talk about the fight. They did not talk about the arrangement, or the month, or what came next. He asked her about her mother, and she told him, quietly and in detail, the way you tell things to someone you trust to hold them carefully. He listened. The flowers dropped around them in the dark. He took her to a beach in law the following Sunday. She had not been to this particular stretch. A quiet one off a road she did not know, reached through a gate that required a code, and opened onto sand and a long flat sea that was greenish-gray in the afternoon light. "How did you find this?" she said. "My mother used to bring me," he said. He was carrying his shoes. She had already removed hers. After school on Fridays when she was alive. She said the city was too loud for her, and the beach was where she could hear herself think. He walked to the water's edge. "I come when I need to hear myself think." She came and stood beside him. The water came up and touched their feet and pulled back. "I have been coming here since she died," he said. "First with Grandma Rose. Then alone." He looked at the horizon. "This is the first time I have brought someone." She stood in the water and did not say anything for a moment. The sea was not dramatic today. It was just the sea, wide and old and entirely unimpressed with whatever was happening on the shore. "What are you thinking about?" she said. "About my grandmother," he said. "About the way she looked at me the night of the birthday dinner, after she spoke to you. I have not seen her look that way in 2 years. Like something she had been holding had been allowed to rest." He paused. "I was thinking about what it took to give her that, and about what it cost you to be in that room." Grace was quiet. "You do not have to continue the arrangement after the month," she said. "If what you were afraid of was your grandmother worrying, she is not worrying now. That has been resolved. The original reason is settled." He turned to look at her. "Is that what you want?" he said. She looked at the water. At the line where the sea met the sky, which from where they were standing appeared to be the edge of the world, and was not. "I am telling you that you have the option," she said. "I am not telling you what I want. I am asking what you want," he said. "Specifically. I am standing on a beach in law, and I am asking you directly." She was quiet for a long moment. "I want to call you when something happens," she said. "Not because the schedule requires it. Because you are the person I want to tell." She kept her eyes on the water. "I want to not have to plan my face before I see you. I want to not have to check which version of myself is appropriate for the occasion." She paused. "I have been doing that, planning my face, my whole life. In offices, in official buildings, at counters, in rooms where people looked through me or at me as a category. I've been doing it for 3 years and 4 months in a building that has your name on it." She stopped. "And I have not done it once with you. And I do not know what to do with that except say it out loud." The sea came in and went out. He turned fully toward her. "Grace," he said. She turned. "I am going to ask you something," he said. "And it is not in any contract, and there is no lawyer, and it is only the two of us and the beach." "Ask," she said. He asked. She stood in the water with the gray-green sea around her feet and looked at him for a long moment. He stood still. He waited, which she had learned was one of the things he was capable of. Waiting without filling the silence, which was rarer than people thought. "Yes," she said. He was quiet. "Is that enough?" she said. "That is everything," he said. They stood in the water for a while longer. The sea came in and went out. Neither of them moved. There was nothing else that needed to be said that evening, and they both knew it. Grandma Rose Dansoboteng lived another 16 months. She went on a Thursday morning in March, in her room in East Legan, with the garden outside the window, the frangipani in flower, and the sound of the family in the next room because she had not wanted quiet. She had wanted the sound of her people. She got it. At the end, The family filed in one by one. Grace went in near the end, when most of the Annies had come out. She sat in the chair beside the bed and took the old woman's hand, both hands this time, because she was the one doing it now, and Grandma Rose opened her eyes. She looked at Grace for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "You stayed." "I stayed, Grandma," Grace said. Grandma Rose smiled. It was small and tired and completely real. "Good," she said. "Good girl." She closed her eyes. "You know what things cost. That is the whole thing. Everything else follows." She went asleep. She did not wake up again. Grace sat with her for a while. Then she went out to where Adrian was in the corridor, standing with his back against the wall and his face a thing he was not trying to control, and she stood beside him, and he put his arm around her, and she let it stay there, and neither of them said anything for a long time, because some things do not need words, and this was one of them. The wedding was on a Saturday in October. Grace had asked for small and Adrian had negotiated her up to medium, which by Danso Boateng standards was still small, but by Grace's standards was every person she had ever known in one place at once, which was not small at all, and she found she did not mind. The ceremony was at Grandma Rose's church. Adrian had asked for that, specifically, and Grace had said yes without hesitating because she understood why he needed that particular anchor on that particular day. The reception was at the family house in East Legan, the garden where the frangipani grew, where Grandma Rose had sat in her chair on the good days and watched the compound and said nothing and watched everything. Dorothy came from Kumasi. She arrived on the Thursday before with enough food already packed to start a second reception, and opinions about the floral arrangement that were expressed immediately and accepted by Evelyn with the professionalism of a woman who understood that some things were not battles, but simply the way of things. But the moment Grace would carry longest happened before any of it. Before the ceremony began, in the small room off the garden where she had been waiting, the door opened and her mother came in. Dorothy Mensah moved slowly now. The surgery had helped, but her legs would never be what they were, and she walked with a cane she had chosen herself in a deep brown wood that she said matched everything. She came into the room, and she looked at her daughter standing there in the dress, and she did not say anything for a moment. Then she crossed the room, and she took Grace's face in both hands, the way she had done since Grace was small, and she looked at her for a long time. "You look like your father," she said. "Around the eyes." Grace could not speak. "He would have been here in the front row making noise," Dorothy said. "You know how he was." She almost smiled. "He would have embarrassed us completely." Grace laughed. It came out wet. Her mother wiped her face with her thumb. Carefully, the way you do when someone is wearing something they cannot ruin. "I am not done being angry with you," Dorothy said quietly. "I want you to know that. We still have our road to walk, you and I." "I know, Mama. But I am also your mother," Dorothy said. "And you are my daughter. And today is today." She took Grace's hand. Just one hand this time. And she held it the way Grandma Rose had held it at the birthday dinner. And Grace understood in that moment that her mother had always held her that way and always would. Through anger, and through pride, and through everything in between. "Come," Dorothy said. "They are waiting." She walked her daughter out. The pastor said the words. The aunties cried. Auntie Ruth from the birthday dinner cried the loudest, which surprised no one. Kevin stood near the entrance with his hands pressed together, and did not lower them until it was over. Felix came and behaved correctly and shook hands and moved on, and that was enough. Mr. Asani stood when Grace passed him on the way to the altar, and she nodded, and he nodded back, and that was the whole conversation, and it was enough. Evelyn was at the back and cried from the first moment, and did not stop. And when Grace found her afterwards, she took her hand, and Evelyn said only, "I knew." From the contract table. The very first night. "I told him." "What did you tell him?" Grace said. "I told him this one is not the same." Evelyn said. "This one knows who she is. Do not waste it." Grace held her hand and said nothing, because there was nothing to add to that. In the garden later, when the light had gone soft, and the music had been playing for hours, and the children were running between the adults' legs, and someone had produced a bottle of schnapps that was being passed around the older men, Grace stood at the edge of the frangipani tree and looked at the garden. She was thinking about the building. Not Adrian's building, though she thought about that too. Sometimes, still. She was thinking about buildings in general. The one she had cleaned for 3 years and 4 months. The corridors. The supply closets. The fluorescent lights that were always slightly too bright or slightly too dim. The knowledge of a building at night that is not the knowledge anyone else has, not the daytime people with their badges and their meetings and their things to accomplish. The night knowledge. The bones of things. She had spent years inside buildings that did not know she was there. That would not have been able to describe her if asked. that had moved through her time and left no mark. One building had marked her. One building and one broken railing, and one man bleeding quietly in a corridor at 11:15 at night. She turned around. Adrian was crossing the garden toward her. He had loosened the tie some time ago, and he was carrying 2 glasses, and he had the look he got sometimes when he had been watching her from a distance and had decided to come over, which was a look she had learned to recognize. "You are doing the quiet thing again," he said. "I am always doing the quiet thing. More than usual." He held out a glass. She took it. "I was thinking about the building," she said. "The Danso Boteng Tower." "What about it?" "I cleaned it for 3 years and 4 months," she said. "And I knew it better than anyone. Better than your day staff. Better than your board members." She looked at the glass. "And I was invisible in it." He was quiet. "I do not say that as a complaint," she said. "I say it because it is the fact. And the fact now is that my name is on it. In a different way. Danso Boteng." She said it slowly, trying the weight of it. "I went from invisible to this. And I keep waiting for the point where those 2 things make sense together, and they do not quite yet." He looked at her. "They do not have to make sense together," he said. "They are just both true. Both of them at the same time. You were there and unseen, and now you are here and seen, and neither of them erases the other. They are just both true." She thought about that. "Your grandmother said I know what things cost," she said. She was right. "I know what this costs too," she said. "A name. Being seen. It is not free. There are things it requires and things it takes, and I've been calculating them." "And?" he said. She looked at the garden. The frangipani. The children running. Her mother Dorothy sitting with 2 aunties in chairs that had been brought outside, talking with the full authority of a woman who had decided she was comfortable and was staying comfortable. Her brother Kevin standing near the food table with a plate in each hand, and the expression of a man who had never seen this much food in one place and did not intend to waste the opportunity. "And the calculation is fine," she said. He looked at her. He almost smiled. The real one. The one that was not performed. The one she had seen for the first time on a corridor bench with a plaster on his hand. "The calculation is fine," he repeated. "Yes," she said. He reached out, and she took his hand, and they stood in the garden while the party went on around them, loud and warm and full of people who had known both of them in different ways and in different lives. And the frangipani dropped a flower that landed on the grass near her feet, white against the green, and the city outside the compound walls went on in the way it always did, without pause, without ceremony, without knowing that anything had changed. Something had changed.